Hello and welcome to Inside the Avatar Studio. Inside the Avatar Studio brings together innovative leaders from the virtual frontier to discuss their perceptions, their perspectives, and predictions of what being virtual means in today's society. I'm your host, Kevin Feenan, and with me today is John Mahon, aka Ham Rambler, curator of the Dublin Sims and Second Life. Dublin Virtually Live is his version and ongoing creation. On opening, the Dublin Sims were featured by Fox News, Irish TV News, and print media, resulting in a major sponsorship contract with Tourism Ireland. John has spoken at a number of conferences and is an active member of Virtual Worlds communities, including the Second Life Communities Conference and Meta Meets conferences in Amsterdam and Dublin. John, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me, Phil.
Yeah. I wanted to ask because I was over at the Blarney Stone earlier, and I really have to ask you, how much bubble gum do you actually have stuck underneath the bar?
Oh, quite a bit. But luckily, I have a bar cat called Boris, and it's one of his jobs to go and try and remove it. And occasionally, I have to take him aside and unstick his gums. But yeah, we have it there. We have it at every bar, as you know. But luckily, virtual chewing gum is actually not so bad as the real stuff.
I have to admit, I was over there earlier today, and I walk in, and of course, that's the very first thing I hear as I come through the door. Is about how much bubble gum is underneath the bar area there. The Sims themselves are actually very impressive. I mean, I've been over there a couple of times, and like I said, I was over there again today just because it's been a little while since I've been there. In going through some of the different news articles and what have you that I've seen on the Dublin Sims, there was a quote that came out that struck me as kind of interesting, and I sort of want to get your perspective on this. How would you define, or what do you consider to be, the ubiquitous Irish pub? How does one know if one's pub is Irish or not?
Oh, okay. Well, one of the things I've been able to do with my real life job as an airline pilot is travel the world. So I've had the opportunity to find Irish pubs literally all over the world, and there's a couple of things they have in common. Any good Irish bar, no matter where it is in the world, will have an Irishman behind the bar. That's one of the first things I found. The second thing I found is that there will be inevitably some Irish music playing somewhere along the way, either live or just coming across on the sound system. And the third genuine aspect of any Irish pub in the world is that as you walk in the door, you will be greeted enthusiastically by bar staff or serving staff or whatever. The rest of the stuff is ancillary. There's usually going to be posters on the wall. There's going to be football here, or Gaelic football heroes, or team flags, or football jerseys, or something up on the wall. But the thing that really makes an Irish pub is genuinely either how the owner sets it up to reflect what an Irish pub should be, and that includes hiring the people behind the bar. As a small example, there's up until recently anyway, I don't know if it's still running, there was a system whereby if you were opening a bar anywhere in the world and you were willing to take on a series of Irish drink products, Jamesons, Bushmills, anything from the Irish Distillers Group, and you were willing to take that product on and guarantee 5 years worth of sales on there, an organization called the Dublin Pub Company, you would send them over the floor layout of your bar, and they would ship an Irish pub to you in the back of a flatbed truck and assemble it. So when anybody walked in, they would see all the ingredients of an Irish bar. What let it down was, and there's one on the shores of Lake Como in Italy, which I walked into, called Sullivan's. I walked in the door and nobody spoke English. Nobody. And that instantly said, well, okay, so it's a fake Irish bar. and therefore it's not going to have the ingredients that make an Irish bar special and unique throughout the world.
It's kind of interesting, especially because I know I'm as we're discussing before we got on air. I'm from Canada, and it's actually quite interesting that part that you mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of contrivances around what is cultural, but this whole aspect in terms of the idea of being greeted at the door and being greeted enthusiastically, I guess one of the things I'm wondering about is, in that last situation that you were talking about, had somebody greeted you enthusiastically, even if it wasn't in your language, would it still feel like an Irish pub?
No. It's what I see in terms of these variations. If I can put this way, there is a branded Irish pub. That is something that is branded with an Irish name, an Irish look, the stuff on the walls, all the rest of it. But unless the people behind the bar understand the branding and the culture that sits behind it, it's very hard for them to put that on, or even to learn it if they don't get it to start with. If I could take you back, this not that long ago in Ireland, we're talking about the sort of 40s and 50s in Ireland, you didn't need a license to run a bar, and a lot of small shops would put a bar at the back of the shops. You'd walk through the shop, whether it was selling clothes or wool or groceries or whatever, and you'd go through a curtain, and in the back would be a small bar with room for about 10 people, and they'd serve you alcohol, and you didn't need to be licensed for it. And then when they brought the licenses out, they actually gave licenses to anybody who had one of these pubs. And there's a small town in County Clare in Ireland that has a street full of bars like this. And it's a great place for a famous annual pub crawl to see if you can get from one end of the street to the other end of the street, having a drink in each of the 26 bars that line this street. And it's only a short street, by the way. I gather the trick is to start at the top of the hill and work down. It's a lot more difficult if you start at the bottom and work up. They started off in this concept. They're called in Irish a shebeen, and they were the social glue of small communities. It was where they all came together, from whatever they were doing. The farmers and all would come into this little place, and they'd socialize, and they'd chat, they'd talk, and they'd meet each other, and then go back about their business. And that's the nature of an Irish pub. It's a social place. If you walk any good Irish bar in the world, if you walk in there on your own, you sit there, you won't be sitting on your own for long. A good Irish barman will be down almost instantly and talk to you and ask where you're from and what are you doing here and did you watch the match last week? Just anything, just engage you in conversation. And that's an essential part of what makes an Irish pub work. And to take this through to the Second Life thing, I actually built the Blarney Stone originally out on the piece of mainland that I had with a view to see if I could replicate that in a virtual world. And I spent a lot of my early time, I'd be there at the bar, and sometimes I'd be there on my own. Of course, when it opens up, the mainland is a big place, and people would walk in, and I would greet them and chat them, and I'd give them fake drinks to hold, and they were animated, so they drink that. And they found it was a place they could meet people safely and talk to people safely in a context that didn't exist, out walking across a sim somewhere and a complete stranger stops you and talks to you and engages with you, and most people in your Second Life would go, "Ooh, strange person, I don't know who you are." In the context of an Irish bar, people engaged automatically. Fascinating study. I'll write a book about it at some stage, but it was fascinating to see how people in this strange environment felt comfortable in the context of an Irish bar to sit and chat and engage with complete strangers.
You have to bear with me. I'm absorbing all of this, and there's so many different questions I'm thinking I want to ask here at this point. I guess to a certain extent, I mean, some of this sort of fascinates me in terms of the experience of replicating this with inside a virtual environment. I mean, I don't know too many well, mind you, I'm not exactly a world traveler, right? But I mean, it's, there's been places where I've gone where they have done, they've greeted you at the door, there's some introductions and what have you. But, this particular type of social engagement, is that specifically Irish? I mean, is that really, I'm trying to find the right words here, but I guess sort of.
Well, let me see if I can help you, because I think I know where you're coming from with this. I don't think it's specifically Irish. In fact, I think in most places around the world where they have bars or cantinas or wherever they go for a drink, or your local pub in the UK, you will see the same sort of thing going on a localized version. So, people who go to a regular bar in the UK or even in the USA, they'll be greeted when they come in, it's the old cheers thing, and they'll have their own stool that they always sit on, and the same banter will go on. And it's localized to their bar and their regulars. What's different about the Irish bar scene is that they can export that. They can open that. They can bring that to almost anywhere in the world. And I mean, some of the smallest cities in South America, I still found an Irish bar and an Irishman behind the bar who'd greet people, and people would come in and enjoy it. And so that's the difference, is that we somehow can export that. We're travelers. We're all over the world for a small nation. We are, but we've been able to bring that concept with us of being able to produce a welcoming place for strangers in a strange land, if I can put it that way.
Right. The one, this is actually interesting because it gets to one of the other questions that I wanted to ask a little bit later, but I think I'm going to ask it now. In the time that you've had the Dublin Sims up, how have you found that the Dublin Sims have really influenced the culture of the people that sort of come through the bar? I mean, have they been taking bits and pieces of the culture that they observe or they participate in as part of the Blarney Stone, as part of being on the Dublin Sims? And have you seen them go out and sort of work with or replicate or sort of change behaviors as a result?
Oh, that's a bit deep. I have seen
probably a little bit deeper than you were expecting, but
no, I was told by a friend of mine to expect the unexpected in this interview system. So and I'm Irish, I can get my way through it. I can say that a lot of people at the early stages who came to Dublin went on out and tried to replicate something similar themselves elsewhere. Maybe not in the Irish theme, but certainly by creating a social environment which had that welcoming feel. Particularly, I have to say, for new people, we were always very keen to welcome the sort of new arrivals in Second Life and to help them and point them. And of course, they found the concept of walking into a bar with people in it sort of easier to do in some respect, because if they were somewhere the other side of the world, they'd probably do a similar thing. They'd find a bar, walk in and sit down and, try and talk to somebody. So we did find that people came to us and stayed with us for a while, and some of them even worked for me for a while. And then they went off and tried to replicate a similar sort of thing in a similar sort of context, not necessarily always as a bar, but as some sort of a system or a facility or a place where people felt welcoming and they engaged with people who came along quite readily and talked to them and helped them to be new people and so on. I did see quite a bit of that. I wouldn't like to claim the credit for that, because I'm sure people were doing this anyway in Second Life for quite some time, even before I got involved. But the Irish bar, it just seems a very useful tool for doing just that, for engaging people, bringing them in, making them feel comfortable, helping them if they're new, and we still do a lot of that nowadays. Right.
When you started the entire sim concept, the Dublin, the recreation of I guess very specific aspects of Irish culture, were there specific? I mean, you've got a lot of very interesting landmarks spread across the three sims that you've got there currently. Were there specific specific landmarks that you were particularly drawn to that you said, I absolutely have to have this one as part of how we're developing and how we're building?
Yes,
land
yes,
structure.
absolutely. I tried the main, what I would call Dublin replica sims are Dublin 1 and 2. The Dublin 3 sim came along later. I'll talk about that in a little while. That's a completely separate project, which has an interesting background. But the two, when I built Dublin 1 initially, I really wanted to capture the basically the city centre area, which centred around O'Connell Bridge, the General Post Office, which is a very historical building for Irish people, and because of where the River Liffey and the bridge was, I was able to get enough space around there to put in Trinity College, another very famous, world famous college. And then Grafton Street is the main shopping street. And then I was able to push a little bit further down to the big social area in Dublin, which is the Temple Bar area. And when it came to building the bar, I actually, building the Sims, which is interesting, Saitar Madonna, who I think is still in the audience, I hope, came along and offered to help me sort of plan and work this project. Just an incredible organizer, and has been totally frustrated by me over all the years been working together, because she's incredibly fixed and organized and said, here's your plan and here's your goals and here's your timescales. And I go, yeah. I'm far busy. I'm having a party right now. I'll sort that in a minute. But one of the things that came out of that was I needed to find a builder, and she found for me a guy, Shukran, who was an American guy who had moved over to the UK to be with his Second Life partner. And I was lucky enough to go to their wedding, and they've had kids and all that. So anyway, I got hold of Shukran, and he was living in Birmingham, and I was living in Red Hill, and just near Gatwick Airport in south of London. And I said, look, the only way we're going to do this, I've got to bring you to Dublin. You've got to go to Dublin, and I've just got to walk the streets with you, and I've got to show you what I want. I can't just give you pictures. So that's what we did. Self and his partner came across to Dublin. We walked around the streets. He took thousands of photographs, and we ended up at the Temple Bar area outside a bar called Gogarty's. And I took him into Gogarty's and bought him his first ever pint of real Guinness. And we sat there, and I said, so here's the deal, Shukran. I want you to build me this. And he said, what, this bar? I said, no, the whole thing, and everything you see around it. And that's why even now, the Blarney Stone is an exact replica of Gogarty's bar in the Temple Bar area of Dublin. And on the wall of the Blarney Stone, if you look in next time you go in to the right-hand side, I've put up photographs there of people who have taken a snapshot of their avatar outside the Blarney Stone and then gone and stood outside Gogarty's in real Dublin and taken exactly the same snapshot. And I said, anybody who comes in with those photographs, I'll put them on the wall. And people have done that. So there was a real effort on my part to try and replicate that part of the city as best I could, to make it an interesting place to walk around and get a feel for Dublin. And again, if you get a chance, they're up on the dublinsl.com website. There's the Irish television news story where they actually found two people in the city of Dublin in real life. A reporter went out and found them who'd been in the Second Life version a week beforehand. They were now walking around the real life version. And one of them commented it and said it's a great way to get a layout for the place and a feel for the place. It's so there was a distinct effort on my part to try and recreate that as much as I could.
Right. That was all done, though, before you started into this partnership with the Tourism Ireland, I guess.
Yes, it was. But it was the thing that opened the door, I think. I got an invitation out of the blue, and I really felt quite humbled by this invitation. But IBM were opening their innovation centre in Dublin, and IBM had been in Dublin for many years. They were opening their innovation centre, and they were looking for 4 presenters to present at this thing to talk about, the Irish and Innovation, and they asked me to present on Second Life and Dublin in Second Life, which honestly I found a quite humbling experience when I listened to the guys who are presenting with me and the sort of stuff they were doing. But it happened that the head of Tourism Ireland was at that presentation or that opening, and he took me aside and said, we should have a talk. You might be able to do something with this because it's just interesting what you've done, and I'd like to know more about it. And so that's when he approached me. Then we talked out a sponsorship arrangement where they would pay. We would put their flags up. We hosted a series of events. We had a St. Patrick's Day parade. We did lots of music events and stuff, and just branded the whole thing with Tourism Ireland. What was fascinating about that whole experience was he said to me quite openly, he said, we will have no way of knowing whether this brings people to see the real city. We've no way of tracking that. No way on earth. We can track the number of hits we get on our website from Second Life. We'd set that up. So all of the tourist signs I had created had a click link through to the Tourism Ireland website. And so people could look at the sign, they click, and then they get the Tourism Ireland website up. So they could track those links, and they were quite happy with the number of click-throughs they were getting. But the big hit for Tourism Ireland came from a very, very strange direction in this one. Once the story got out about Tourism Ireland using Second Life, and that was the story that interested people, we tracked how far out it went. They were keeping track of where they were getting Tourism Ireland hits. And the guy involved rang me late one night, incredibly excited, saying, well, we've just... the project between Tourism Ireland and Dublin Second Life has just been blogged by the biggest blogger in Brazil. He's got millions of followers, and we would have no way of knowing how we could have got our promotion into Brazil. So as far as we're concerned, we have more than got anything we could have dreamed of from this project with Dublin Second Life. So that's they got what they wanted out of it in a very indirect way, and we got a lot of profiling out of it, and so we started getting a lot more visitors. So it worked for both of us. Unusual tack for them to take, but it worked for both of us.
Has it changed your vision at all in terms of where you wanted this original concept to go?
I if I'm being honest, I'm not sure I had a concept of where it was going. This was sort of field of dreams territory. Well, if you build it, they'll come, and let's see where it goes. And over the years, as you know, Second Life has ebbed back and forward and stuff. It's taken different directions, and we're constantly looking for what is the next thing we can do with the Sims and especially in relation to commerce. We're running an experiment program at the moment, or project at the moment, with a shop in the middle of Dublin called the House of Ireland, who sell Irish branded high quality products. And we put a proposal to them that we would build their shop in Second Life so that people could come in and buy the Second Life versions and then click through and buy the real life versions, mail order if they want, straight from the House of Ireland website. And this is an area we're exploring as possible the next way to go. But in the middle of all that, I still need to get a tie up, I think, with something like an Irish or a Dublin radio station of some description, so I can just draw the real city and the virtual city closer together on a daily basis. So I've got lots of other things going on in my mind, and where it's going to end up, no idea. We'll just keep rolling with it and find interesting things to do with it.
Right. So is this, I guess, because I mean, there's some people that I talk to in Second Life, and they start off with something. I mean, even Rockcliffe started off this way. Rockcliffe started off as a little bit of a joke to begin with, and then all of a sudden it became serious, and it's like, oh my God, what do we do now? And I'm wondering whether or not, in terms of the way you're looking at this in terms of the future, in terms of what the next 5 years or so are going to look in terms of here? Are you looking at it still, or are you looking at it rather through a through that cultural lens that you started off with, or more of a business lens, or a little bit more of a blending of the two? Or
well, it started off as purely a personal project. I've been away from my home city for many years, and it was kind of nice for me to recreate it and find that I could share it with other people from around the world. I had some of the most incredible letters and emails not long after I opened it up. I think about a week after I opened it up, I had an email from an American lady who had she had been to Trinity College in Dublin. She'd studied there, and while she was there, she fell in love with an Irish guy, and they went through university. And when it came to an end of the university, she had to go home, and he didn't want to go and move there, and so they said goodbye. And she wrote to me and said, I have to write to you because I've just found your sim in Second Life, and I've walked around it, and it brought back a lot of wonderful memories for me. And I stood on Halfpenny Bridge, which is a small old wooden bridge across the River Liffey, and I watched the sun go down, and I cried. And I was blown away by this, that I had suddenly created something which could have that level of impact on anybody. And I've since had a few other interesting emails along the way of people saying, God, it was so great to see that part of Dublin again. I haven't seen it for 40 years when I visited when I was younger, and I have to go and do it again. So in many ways, the kick I'm getting from all of this, apart from the social aspect and making lots of new friends, is seeing the impact it has on different people for different reasons. So to me, it's primarily the social aspect. If I can turn it into a successful business, that's going to take a little bit longer, and it's also going to take a lot more work because, as you know, Second Life has fallen off the public radar in many ways. They're still getting lots of sign-ins, but so I feel my challenge now is to raise the profile of it again in Dublin City. What I would love to get to is the point whereby any major entertainment event, social event, sporting event that's happening in the real city, we find a way to link it back to the virtual one. So you get a real engagement between the two. So people who either haven't been to Dublin or are from Ireland or whatever can suddenly find a virtual space where they can, for example, they can watch the live Gaelic football matches, they can listen to a music event or whatever. So that's the next phase I'm going to run into is work with the guys in the real city to find a way to link the two places more readily almost on a daily basis. So there's a constant link between the two. Expats is always a good market to look for people who are from Ireland and have moved away and are looking for a bit of Irish virtual space. We do have quite a number of them come and see us. So that's where I want to take it next. I want to develop that a bit more. I'm hoping to get over to Dublin sometime in the next couple of weeks and start plodding around, knocking on doors, talking to radio stations and places like that. Radio station, I think, is a good way to start because to them it's an easy fix to get an international audience, shall we say?
Right. One of the things that I found several years ago, I got the opportunity to go to China as part of an industry tour with the University of Toronto, and as part of that, we hit a number of different places. One of which was a British pub. Not, and I would almost go to say it would almost be an Irish pub, except that the owner was expecting us. So of course we got greeted warmly when we walked through the door. But to a certain extent, as you meet people internationally that come to the Dublin Sims, do you find in any way that the Dublin Sims themselves sort of act as an insulating opportunity for them to, and I think you've sort of alluded to this, but I guess what I'm sort of thinking about is this idea of culture shock, where you go into a culture that you're not familiar with, and the first thing people want to do is they want to search out something that's familiar, right? And I'm just wondering, out of the people that you've met that have come through, how many have sort of deliberately sought out the Dublin Sims as compared to, it happened to be something in the destination guide and they just happened to wander by? I mean, have you found that there's a distinct difference between the type of person that comes in, or?
I can't honestly say I've noticed that. We have featured in Destination Guide. We have been promoted quite a bit by the Linden guys. Luckily, I think because most of them they've all had their snapshots taken in the Blarney Stone for some reason. Do people find it out? I think when people, anytime they arrive somewhere new, whether real life or virtual worlds or anything like that, they will always look for an anchor point. They'll always look for something familiar they can grab hold of and engage with first before they get a chance to branch out into the unknown. And from that point of view, an Irish bar was an easy fix, and works incredibly well. The city itself, I mean, I've looked around at some of the other virtual city things, replicas and things. We set up a program. We were just talking about it today with Sidearm called Sister Cities, where we found city builds and we linked them together so that if you're in one of the cities, there was an easy link to go and look at one of the other ones, and that worked for a while. We found people were saying, "Oh, I've never been to Dublin. I'll have a look at Dublin." And while they were there, they say, "Oh, look, hey, there's a link here to San Diego. I'll go and have a look at San Diego." And I was involved. In fact, I owned San Diego for a little while, but I sold it on because I just didn't know enough about the stuff that goes on in San Diego to be able to get it up the same way I had with Dublin. So I think finding the familiar in this strange virtual land is a plus. It is a draw. It will be something to say, "Whoa, well, let's go and see Dublin." Whether it's always successful will really depend on what people have added to their virtual city replica. I know London is quite big. I've worked and seen the guys there. Some people have taken small other pieces of Ireland and tried to recreate it with not great success, I have to say. I have gone around and looked at them, and they don't seem to be as popular or as engaged as we've managed to get Dublin. Obviously, my vision would be to build the whole country, but 32 Sims later, somebody somewhere has to be paying that bill, and I'm not really sure I'm ready for that. But I do think that the familiar, to answer your original question, I do think the familiar is a good draw to people who are new to virtual worlds, because everything else about it is strange, weird, and wonderful. And finding something familiar to wean yourself in, shall we say, or become familiar in what might be considered a safe environment is good, and it's popular. And we had at one stage in Trinity College, we had an arrival point where people would shortly after they joined, or as they joined, would just pitch up in Trinity College, and we would have staff down there greeting them and helping them and pointing them and say, just walk out through the gates underneath the archway, down the street on the right, there's the pub. And that worked. And so we had a lot of new people who were wandering into the pub as their first real experience of virtual worlds. And when we try to keep them safe that way.
There's a lot of interesting tie-ins that you've sort of been alluding to as you've been going through here. So, I mean, this idea in terms of some of the future vision that you've got for where some of this stuff is going, and then this idea of this social glue in the context of the engagement. in which people find themselves when they come to an Irish pub that they don't necessarily get somewhere else. Is there or are you finding that there is I'm trying to figure out how to term this correctly. Is there a good way of making a connection with people? Like, as we go forward, as you said, the Second Life sort of dropped off the radar of a lot of people. In the meantime, we've got iPads, we've got tablets, we've got all these other shiny things that are sort of distracting people. But yet, it sounds like, in terms of what you've built, there's a very compelling reason to have that nice, safe place for people to come to, where they can interact, to watch the football game or to watch the what was we were talking about earlier, the Gaelic and the Australian
football.
rules football groups started coming together and bashing themselves silly. But having that place where they can come to inside a virtual setting, right? I mean, those types of people. How do you feel is the best way to reach out to those people, considering this sort of drop off that we've sort of seen in the last little while in virtual worlds?
It's difficult. We haven't seen, in terms of Dublin traffic numbers, however you want to measure them. If you want to measure them literally and just compare yesterday with today or with tomorrow, last week, last month, last year, we've see a constant and continual growth in traffic numbers in Dublin. Now, whether a lot of them can be new people, particularly when we had the arrival point, and a lot of them get comfortable with Second Life in Dublin and then go off and explore and come back and visit us every now and then. I did start a little scheme which I think is still running, which was I'd randomly pick somebody new to Second Life and who were sitting there saying, how do I do this and how do I sit at the bar and all the rest of it. And I just say, well, how do I get new clothes? How do I earn money? And I've done this quite a number of times now, where I've just suddenly randomly given them 500 lindens, and I say, look, there's 500 lindens. All I'll ask you to do, if you're around long enough, at some stage, later down the track, if you're making money or whatever you're doing in Second Life, if you have a chance, find some other new person and give them the 500 lindens and pass it on. And a number of people have come back to me and commented on that, how I was told to come and see you because I went to this other place completely in Second Life, and somebody gave me 500 lindens and said, go to Dublin and to Blarney Stone to talk to the owner because I promised I'd pass it on. And that was an interesting experiment from my point of view to see how that grew and developed. So people will, it's very hard to, I really don't understand, if I can put it that way, how this all works. All I do is I try to make people feel welcome. I help them if they're new. We really have a very, very strong campaign within the Dublin team in Reykjavik to look after newbies. Now, we will get the ones who just want to come in and be disruptive, and they leave again very quickly, sometimes with an entertaining aspect to it, but just the people who just want to come in and be disruptive and nuisance and abusive and all the rest of it. We call it the Dublin astronaut program. We invite everybody to lock their cameras in on the individual and press the button and away they go. But we really do work hard to try and encourage new people to come, because we're hoping they'll pass it on. So when they get enthused, or they tell their friends, new people come in and they'll also want to come to Dublin. And some of that must be happening for us to be able to keep the numbers that we have going. So we have a formula that works as far as we're concerned from that point of view. My challenge is to how to make it a financially viable, or even a self-financing might be the best way to put it, system. And therefore, if I can get to the point where people not only come and say, oh, it's nice to walk the city and I like sitting in the bar, but hey, wait, there's the rugby match is on this weekend. We'll go and watch it in Dublin. Now, it's possible they could go and just sit at home and watch it on the TV, but it's that community aspect, if a group of guys interested or cheering for individual teams or whatever, sitting in a virtual bar from all around the world, sitting in a virtual bar doing this is the bit that is the magic for me, and that's the bit I have to continue to develop and grow and make it work. I don't see at this point, I don't see Second Life or what I'm doing in Second Life becoming a great big breadwinner for me that's going to make me lots of money. It's, as far as I'm concerned, Dublin and Second Life is going to be almost another home for me. It's where I go and I meet my friends. I mean, I'm doing a lot of DJing these days because I quite enjoy that. And just engaging and meeting people. And I've met some of the most amazing people in there. And always looking for interesting new things to do with it. And that will keep people engaged and coming back. Now, what happens with Second Life in the future? Who knows? If you ask anybody in the lab, they say, well, we're making money. We're constant steady growth. We're all the rest of it. But I think they're pretty much relying on people like me to keep it interesting and keeping it growing and keeping it enthused. And, I don't know how many people like me there are out there still.
Oh, I would suggest that there's quite a few people with good intentions, but I know from my experience, there's a huge difference between those people that have the vision to do the type of things that you've been doing and those people who like to talk about it. And certainly the Dublin Sims are extremely well known, and it's been, to a large extent, I mean, your growth has been something that we've been seeing through the various different conferences. We've seen it through MetaMeets, we've seen it through the SLCC, we've seen it through the activities that you've had on the Sims there, we've seen it through the write-ups. I mean, there's a lot of places where you've touched a lot of individual lives as you've gone along. And I guess one of the things I'm sort of curious about is the connection between what happens in world and what happens outside of Second Life. I mean, obviously, you've done a lot of sponsorship of events at the SLCC. You've been very engaged with MetaMeets, right? Which are real life events, right? Where you've taken this concept and you've exported it, so to speak, right? With inside these localized settings. How do you find that has helped sort of solidify the connection with people when you do these particular types of events? I mean, is this just simply a good way of connecting with people, or is there more to it that you're finding that people are getting out of those real life experiences when you have the opportunity to make them happen?
Well, I was just as you were formulating that question, I was just thinking about the incredible fun I've had both with SLCC and MetaMeets, where I do this thing called the Blarney Stone on tour. Yeah. Where I literally just find a local bar or a pub, or I think in San Francisco it was actually more of a
coffee shop or something.
Coffee and sandwich shop. And we said, can we take it over for the night? And we're just going to bring lots of people in here, and they're going to buy lots of stuff from you. And
I think we took it over for more than the night, I think. They had to pay their waitress overtime, if I remember correctly.
They did, and we had problems because it crowded out onto the street. And when poor old Philip eventually came around, because we'd ended up in a conflict with the Linden Labs event. And when Philip finally came around, he couldn't get in. The place was so jammed. He ended up touching off it briefly on the corner. But for me, that's actually just saying, hey guys, come on, you've seen the virtual one. Let me introduce you to the real one. Let's have the real life version. Now, we've always involved music. I've been involved in music in Second Life from very early on. Again, sidearm there, at a very early stage in the Blarney Stone when it was on the mainland. We had probably what was the first music festival in Second Life. This was a sponsored one for a guy who was building sims for people to rent property on. so I've been involved in the music scene for quite a while. So the real life events like this at the conferences, most of the people there will know Dublin. Most of them will know the Blarney Stone. So as soon as I say, I call an event the Blarney Stone on tour, put my name beside it, people just come to it. You know, it's a social occasion. It's going to involve music. It's almost certainly going to involve drinking, and it's always going to be a bit of fun. And that's one of the easiest things I've been able to export into real life that I quite enjoyed. I'm not a bar owner. I don't run a bar for a living. So very, very briefly, about once a year, I get a chance to do something of that nature and be the host and the landlord and have fellow well met and greet everybody and have a bit of fun with it.
Right. The one of the other things I was Dirk's just saying in local chat here, social drinking music fun. What else is there? Well, there's the barmaids as well, but I mean that's besides the point.
Yeah.
You had talked earlier about when you first started the Dublin Sims, you had made this connection with IBM. And I wanted to explore that concept a little bit more because Ireland has, over the last few years, although they've gone through this peak and they've gone through a bit of a valley, but I mean they've had a lot of top technology companies coming into various places in Ireland. So Intel's there in a big way, Yahoo, Adobe, Microsoft, right? A lot of the big names in information technology. Has, other than this connection with IBM, have there been any other specific influences in technology companies and how they've been interacting between this idea of, technology, industrial growth, and tourism? And especially with regards to what you guys are doing on the Dublin Sims, I mean, has there been more of that other than just with IBM, or has that just simply been a limited context which happened to be right place, right time, right people?
The IBM one was certainly the last one. That they were opening their innovation center. They've been in Dublin for quite some time, and they're opening their innovation center, and they had just seen all the publicity that I'd had in Dublin on around the place, and so they asked me to speak about it. Honestly, as I said earlier on, I felt significantly out of my depth talking about my virtual Irish bar. When I listened to what some of the other guys were developing and talking about, it was quite humbling in lots of ways, but it was good fun. And they invited me along, and I met some really interesting and intriguing people there. And I've done some other stuff with some of the smaller technology companies in Ireland. I've built some of their premises for them, which they used for a while. But the main appeal hasn't really been from the technology companies, I must admit. I have had a lot of interest from people trying to promote Dublin or people trying to promote Ireland. So the Tourism Ireland was the big one. I then instantly jumped into a sponsorship deal with Dublin Tourism to the point where they actually sponsored my participation in SLCC one of the years, and actually gave me some money to buy people a drink in a local bar. And we did a lot of stuff with Dublin Tourism, including building a replica of their headquarters, which is a 16th century church which has been decommissioned or whatever it's called. The other big interest I had for a while, and it was big in terms of their interest in using it and their what I would call their sudden interest in using Dublin and Second Life, was from an organisation called the Industrial Development Authority. Now, the IDA are the people who actually bring in all these companies into Ireland. The Microsofts and the IBMs. That's their role, is to bring companies into Ireland. And I got a call late one night from the IDA representative in San Francisco, who had apparently, they'd been sitting somewhere up in Silicon Valley doing presentations about coming to set up in Ireland, and they bumped into some of the Linden Lab guys wandered by and was talking to them, and they gave this presentation about Dublin and about Ireland, and the Linden Lab guy says, "Oh yeah, I know all about Dublin because, Dublin's been in Second Life for some time, and the guys from the IDA knew nothing about it." So I got this really embarrassed phone call late at night from California where he said, "Look, I got hold of your phone number. We didn't know you were in Second Life, so we're kind of embarrassed when the Linden Lab guys, we gave them a pitch and they said they knew all about Dublin. So can you, tomorrow, is it possible you can get in to see our head office?" And I explained, well, I can't tomorrow because I'm living in the UK. But so I got over there 2 days later and they said, we want to do something now. Just name your price, tell us what it is. We have to do something now because we're desperately trying to get Linden Labs in, and we're embarrassed about the fact that we didn't know that you had Dublin in Second Life. So we did a very nice contract with them. We built premises for them. We streamed some of their very, very interesting videos they'd put together, promotional videos on Ireland. And that's really where I've had most of the interest. I haven't really had any of the technology companies say, "Oh well, it's interesting. The Second Life thing. We're from IBM, or IBM was just a come and present to us about Dublin." But none of the other technology companies have engaged us in any way, with the possible small exception of Nortel. Nortel is a Canadian telecoms company. And if you're not aware of this, they at one stage they built a Second Life client into the back end of their telephony software, exchange software, and they then rented a place from me, created a virtual bank, and had it so that when a Second Life avatar walked into this virtual bank, it triggered on their software that the Second Life bank was active and that this avatar was in, and the avatar's name could be linked to a real person's, your real life bank account, and you could do bank transactions and get documents and talk to mortgage advisors. And they demoed this. There is a video on YouTube. If you look up Nortel Second Life or Nortel Dublin, you can watch this little video. And they demoed this. We had to lock that bit of the SIM off regularly for them while they demoed it to all the major banks. And there was an interesting level of interest in it. And then Nortel sadly went out of business. So it never progressed any further. But getting back to your original question, no, I haven't had a lot of the technology companies show any interest in doing anything with me in Second Life. It's more been the Irish government agencies, Irish authorities, either Irish tourism kind of thing.
Yeah. You had mentioned a little bit earlier that with Sims 1 and 2, that you had a particular vision with regard to those, and yet Dublin 3 was a bit of a unique situation.
Yes, yeah.
So what's the story behind Dublin 3?
Oh, again, YouTube. If you go to YouTube and look at a video called Dublin Coastal Development, from Dublin Coastal Development. This was a Dutch real estate company who were what they'd done in Holland was they put together a piece of software which went out and looked at all of the websites held by estate agents selling property and pulled them all into one front end. So you could go into this website and say, I'm looking for a 4-bedroomed house in this part of the country with this amount of land and with this number of bedrooms. And it would throw you up from all the other sites. There's a word for it. I can't think what it is. And these companies were setting up in Dublin. And they produced this viral video, the Dublin Coastal Development. And when they produced it, it involves building a fake or a new island off the coast of Dublin, similar to the things that were going on in Dubai. And there was going to be a new city centre and a new shopping, housing, business district, and lots of waterside properties and so on. So they created this fake viral video. And when they first released it, it was a time when there was a big debate going on in government circles in Dublin about what they were going to do about the city and the docks area and how they were to expand it. And somebody picked up on this video and thought it was real. And the newspapers got hold of it and thought it was real, and therefore it had questions raised in Parliament about it. Now, if you get a chance to watch the video, you should. At the very end of it, there is a huge, I mean, the clue is so big, I can't believe people missed it. And in the middle of it all, they say, the world's only giraffe-only zoo, right? And they had this animation of these giraffes hanging around. So this viral went out, and they got a lot of strange PR about it, and the project was ongoing, and they called me up and said, look, can we recreate this in Second Life? Because we can get another bite of the cherry out of it if we do, because we can actually have, the first resident of Shamrogue Island. Shamrogue. All the clues. Shamrogue. Okay. We can have the first resident getting his keys to his property and the big opening, and we can get all this great fudge publicity out of it. So he said, yeah, sure. So they paid for it all, and we created this. If you look at the map, at the world map of the three Sims, you can actually see that it is, in fact, it's a causeway which goes out to an island, and the island is shaped like a shamrock, and it has sort of green lights around the edge of it to look like a shamrock from space. This was all the blurb in the original video. And so we built it. We built it on that basis, and they paid for it, and we made a bit of money out of it. And then sadly, the Dutch pulled out of the project, and they said, oh, well, it's not really working for us. So it didn't continue. The real life project didn't continue. So we were left with this island sim, which we just filled full of properties and rented out. You walk across the causeway into Dublin, but it doesn't represent anything in the real Dublin whatsoever. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it now.
There's no Shamrock Island in the real Dublin.
Absolutely not. It's a funny video. Please go and have a look at it, and be shocked at how people were cut. You have to watch it to the really very end before you realize, oh, okay, that's a fake.
Well, I saw the giraffe zoo, and I was looking at it a little bit sideways. But
giraffe only zoo. We built a giraffe zoo, but the problem we had with the scripted giraffes is they would regularly sort of take off and whistle through your music event or something. This giraffe would come in through one wall and out the other, which took a bit of explaining. It's Second Life, these things happen.
You've had too much to drink when.
Well, that's it. You're sitting in a bar and a giraffe floats by. How do you know?
Yes. That's probably typically Irish. Supposed to pink elephants.
No, pink elephants. Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah.
Anyway, listen, I've got one question for you, and then I think we're going to have to wrap up at this point. If you had a crystal ball, what do you think the impacts of virtual worlds will be on society 5 to 10 years from now?
It's crystal balls. I can't really say. I do think the internet in general and virtual worlds in particular have broken down a lot of the social barriers that we've built around ourselves. And if I'm being a real idealist and optimist, I'd like to see that continue to the point where genuinely open discussion can take place from people all around the world about the big topics that are affecting all of us in an environment where having these conversations is natural and normal. We can't seem to do it in the real world. There's a faint little part of me hope that somehow the virtual world will help bring that conversations together, because in a virtual world, you can't base what people are like or what their thoughts or what their beliefs or anything are by their appearance. We do a lot of that in the real world. In the virtual world, all that disappears. All you have is your personality. That's my one thing about virtual worlds. You bring in there your personality and you get judged or praised purely on that.
Very good. John, I'd like to thank you very much. That's all the time we have available for the broadcast show today. I'd like to invite you to stay for an after-show wrap-up. I mean, I'm quite sure that other people here have questions that they'd like to ask as well. It's been wonderful having you on the show, and I'm looking forward to good things to come from both yourself and the Dublin Sims.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you to your team who've made me feel very welcome here today.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. That's it from the Rock. I'm going to get tongue-tied here. That's it from the Rockcliffe Rotunda. Join us, I guess, next month, where Bevan's going to surprise me in terms of who our guest is going to be. She's trying to con me into something I'm not quite sure I want to do, but we're going to see what happens. So either way, Inside the Avatar Studio is produced by Bevan Whitfield in association with Rockcliffe University Consortium. Technical production by Robustus Hacks and Mel Burns in association with Metaverse TV. For more information on Inside the Avatar Studio, please check out our website at avatarstudio.info or subscribe to our Twitter or Facebook fan pages at uRockcliffe. And that is all from the Rockcliffe Rotunda. Thank you all very much.